Pam, your voice is real echoey in terms of when you talk. I wasn't able to understand what you said.
Is it? How is that any better, Harlan?
It's understandable, but it's not pleasant. It's just there's a echoey or room sound. Very different from
telling me. Yeah, I don't know if I can fix that.
Harlan, I think it might be you. Because you sound really echoey to me, but Pam doesn't.
I sound echoey to you?
Well, you don't now, but you sounded a little kind of garbled earlier.
Yeah, it's how close you are. If I get real close, I'm good. And if I'm farther away, I'm not so good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Pam, you sound all right to me. Billy, can you hear Pam okay? Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, are we ready to get started, Billy?
We are.
Great, good. Well, so good morning. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the second annual Northwest Illinois Volunteerism Conference. I'm Pam Clark-Reidenbach with the Northern Illinois Center for Nonprofit Excellence. And Billy Callahan is with us. Wave, Billy. She's Associate Director at NICNE as well. NICNE and the Leadership Exchange on Volunteerism Participants with support from the Serve Illinois Commission, AJ Gallagher and Company, and Imperial Punch of Rockford have presented a full year of online interactive volunteer management programming that's been focused on creating a culture of connection and inclusion in volunteerism. Each monthly session includes a 1-hour presentation, followed by a 1-hour group discussion moderated by our dear friends, Carrie Acevedo and Martisha Brown. And today is the last in that series. We ask you all to mute your computers for better reception for all and to type questions into the chat box. You'll have the opportunity at the end of the presentation and during the discussion to unmute and participate in Q&A. So unless you have any questions, we're going to get started. It is truly my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, who will be speaking on the topic of Volunteer Age Matters, a generational approach to volunteer recruitment and management. Nancy Esari Ouedraogo, State Specialist in Community and Economic Development from the University of Illinois Extension, will be our speaker today. Please help me to welcome Nancy.
And it's just wonderful to be here with you this morning. I was very honored to be able to sort of greet you and be the herald to your exit of your final session, and hope that the conference has gone well. It seems like it's been so dynamic over the months during the pandemic, and really just great to see everyone today, and looking forward to an interactive session where we can talk about ideas. So let's see here. I've got 2 slideshows here. I wonder why. I'm gonna just go with one. So I am, like the moderator said, I'm Nancy Ouedraogo. Been working with the U of I Extension for almost 6 years. So it's been a really, lucky time to grow in this role as a specialist in community and economic development, and serve the state in various ways. And some of that is, just travel or meeting up online with different folks and different organizations about what they want to, back in the day when we would travel in person, it seemed like it was going on a little bit more to go and do a workshop with an organization about their goals and their volunteer age matters goals, or their consumer age matters goals, or their workplace age matters goals. This is a program that we've been delivering for a long time, and we continue to look at the research around the generations to add to the information that we like to present on all of the generations that are still at play in our society today. And so right out the gate, I want to share a handout with both of you. And while I'm doing that, you can tell me if you see my slide all right. But in the chat box is a public link to view and download a worksheet. And so this worksheet I've used in the past with organizations. In the past, they've thought of several goals that they use with this material around volunteer recruitment and retention. But there are other goals that you could have, training objectives for training, for development of your volunteers, skill development, or strengthening maybe synergistic bonds and teamwork, team building. So there's a lot of goals that you might have out the gate in looking at the different characteristics of the generations. And so I thought that I would give you this handout so that you could look at it and see, okay, here's a few things that organizations have thought of in the past. And then what can you add to that? What you know, specific to your organization, what can you add to that? To sort of, let's focus on why we want to learn this content or relearn this content and why we are talking about this today. I have a little bit of a disclaimer here. So with the generations in this discussion, we have to recognize that there are perceived differences between the generations that are often greater than the actual differences. And that's normal. We are judging beings. We like to have judgments so that we can differentiate and categorize things in our life and be able to organize information so that we can process that information and use it in decision making. But those differences that we discern between the age groups are often greater than those actual differences. So I think we know that we see a lot of similarity across generations, more similarity across generations than differences. Makes sense because we've been around as humans for a long time. We have this same sort of disclaimer in our cultural competency trainings that we do, that there certainly are more similarities across cultures than differences, but it's useful for us to look at differences to be able to be well trained on how we want to contemplate our organizational goals and our communication styles with folks. So let's see here. And not every person's going to identify with the description of their assigned generation. There is this idea of being a next gen. I'm a next gen boomer. I'm not in the baby boomer cohort, but I think that as a next gen boomer, maybe some of the traits that my parents had, I carried those on. And so it's just one example of how we might not fit the description of millennial or Gen X or Gen Z at times, and might have a different characteristic about ourselves that we hold as a strong value. And so we don't fall into the categorizing that I'm going to talk about today. And so one thing I want to do is just briefly go over the generations. And it's important to, to outline here that researchers have used a variety of names for the generations. But these are names that we pull from the Pew Research Institute. And I think these are probably the most common labels that we label the generations with. And then this is sort of the breakdown in population in the US of who falls into what generation. And so not included in this illustration is a generation that has left this earth, and they're around a little bit, what they call the greatest generation. And there are 1.75 million people who were born prior to 1928 right now that are still around. And so to recognize that. There are people who are born after, of course, 2012, that sort of post-Generation Z group that we haven't given a label to. They're very young, and they represent 26.8 million. So those little kids that are running around. So the very, very old individuals and the very young are not in our descriptions today. So again, this is what I do when I'm in a room full of people. I want to see raised hands. There is a function if you go to on your dashboard where you can react and raise a hand. I think it might work. Maybe if Billy or Pam want to test it and show me that it works. There it is, the clapping or the hand raise or whatever. So do we have any silent generation folks in the room? And if you want to just put your hand up, I'm going to open up this little participant box so I can kind of see if there's any silent gen folks. Okay, where are my boomers? Where are my baby boomers? I'm going to see like the whole thing light up maybe. I don't know. Couple. Yeah. And then you just went straight for the thumbs up. And so then Gen X. Got some Gen Xers. We have some touting there. Where are my millennials? Okay. I love that there is a really nice spread of those different generations in the room. I'll say Gen Z. We'll be surprised if you're here, but not totally surprised. Do you have any Gen Z folks around? Room went quiet, so they're coming though. Well, I want you all to think this next sort of slides just to sort of get us into lightly dipping our toe in the pool with on all of these generations. I want you all to use the chat and think about a socio-political event in your life that really impacted you. You know, I think of the terrorist attacks of 9/11. I think I was 18, so just newly in college. So, you know, you go out in the world and lo and behold, there's some scary things out there. But there's a lot of different socio-political events that we could outline as things that impacted our life. The Great Depression. Some of us feel impacted by the Great Depression through things we learned from our grandparents or parents. So there's a lot of socio-political events that affected us. And so, you know, these are environmental factors that sort of form our society in different ways throughout the generations, and they impact the generations differently. And so some of those things that happened before you were born might not impact you as much. And so what do we have so far? Columbine, Robert Kennedy assassinations, Martin Luther King, wonderful. Rodney King riots, 9/11, John Bonet, Vietnam War, George Floyd, Challenger explosion. These are all huge. George Floyd, 9/11. It's just wonderful to see, you know, a recognition that these events and a lot of other events really did sort of impact our view of the world and maybe our, you know, how our experiences form who and how we are to an extent, these life events. So let me go forward in my slides here. All right, I want to see if anybody can tell me what these images represent for the silent generation and some of their life influences. You can put it in the chat if you like, if you feel like participating. It's a fun game to see if you can get all three. So we've, of course, have World War II. We have a line, it looks like a bread line, right? More or less, symbolizing the Great Depression. And then we have the onset of the Cold War, when the Cold War started, right? All of a sudden, a different sort of world stage with different actors and different comportments. And these influence I will just mention are those macro events. They're external and they're things that really impacted the generation as a whole. So there could be many other life influences as well that affected the silent generation. And baby boomers, what do we have here? Can go ahead and put it in the chat if you want to try to get 1, 2, 3 all in one. It's pretty easy. So we have scandal and we have Watergate. Different viewpoints of government in this generation. I feel like the baby boomers have really done a lot to turn things on their head for everybody and get us all more critical of just about anything, which is very important. So then we've got TV, and that's when we saw TV. And, mass media in general, right? This is a little bit more, when mass media really started to take hold. And then we have the Vietnam War, which I think folks mentioned in the chat as well. Generation X. This is where we saw those first sort of events and political, social commentary and things like that around AIDS. We didn't know what it was, and there was a lot of, as this sign says, hysteria about that. Now, even today we're talking about how this is a curable thing or a treatable. It's how it's a treatable and possibly curable, right? And of course preventable. We have a cellular phone. This huge brick that this guy's holding up to his head, that was a cell phone. And then we have more diversity in the media, which, says something. All of these things say something for Generation X. We started to see more influence about rights and about, what do we want to be? I think even every generation sort of had that contribution. Okay, so the millennials saw 9/11, of course, right? And we saw reality TV. This is when reality TV started. So such a weird thing for the older generations, but I think it caught on, and reality TV is something, it's looking at the everyday person or those different types of productions. And then of course, globalization. We saw a lot of sort of globalization that impacted millennials, and of course continues to impact as these different generational groups become more and more multicultural. I think the majority of Gen Z will not be white. I think the majority of Gen Z now is non-white. So we have, less homogenous society as we go. And we have Generation Z life influences. Barack Obama, first African-American president. We have the war on terror as something that's been there. And we have social media. There's some other things that maybe have influenced these generations. Some say also the school shootings more so impact Generation Z than millennials. We sort of saw it as we were already in school. There really wasn't policy in place to deal with it. Now it seems to be just like a regular thing. You go to school and it's already being incorporated into our schooling that we have to be ready for that type of thing. Okay, so the next few slides are going to talk about motivation and recruitment. And so these are considerations for the volunteer cohorts. If you are wanting to have sort of a nice spread of volunteers from the different generations, or maybe you want to target a generation to enhance your volunteer base, and you want to look at motivation, and you also want to look at the difference in messaging that you have to have with the different generations. And so whether your volunteers are specialized or not, you're going to have some basic motivations and messaging that you're going to want to do in recruiting, and also just communications for as you're coordinating around volunteer activities. And so we're going to share strategies for that as well. And so before we start this, I want to ask everybody, how do you currently recruit volunteers? And did we want to exchange not only how we recruit volunteers, but then as we're going through these slides, what are some other ideas about how you would want to recruit volunteers? And you could just add them in the chat as we go. Okay, so the first of these again, we have the silent generation. You know, they might still be willing to volunteer in maybe a new organization, probably not likely. They are sort of comfortable with what they've already been doing, but you could see a volunteer from the silent generation pitching in. No problem pitching in from this generation. See the image, we can do it. This is, you just roll up your sleeves, basically, in this generation. So they may be willing to try something new, to be able to do that. What you want to remember for this generation is that they may have some limitation due to age. It could be physical or mental. And when I say mental, I don't necessarily mean mental health, but I just mean in skill, in obtaining skills, there might just be some issues with some, maybe like a new technology or some new thing that they just don't want to catch on doing. And we're all probably going to be in that boat at some point. The silent generation's been around a long time. There's a lot up there. So also because of the idea that they might have some limitations, maybe physical or cognitive or whatever, you're going to want to be very clear about what they're going to be doing, so that they know, how long am I going to be standing, where am I, in proximity to different amenities. So you're going to want to be really clear about the type of activities they're going to do, and then during that activity or during that time period, you're going to want to check in with them, and you're probably going to want to check in with them one-on-one, or maybe in just their group, to really get an idea as to whether they are accommodated in the volunteer role that they are in. And that's going to be how you retain them. Otherwise, they might not hurt themselves to help you, right? And so you can see on the screen, I won't outline everything, but respect really does still matter with this generation. There is a way to speak with this generation. You can still be quite, you can use slang, you can be yourself, and that's fine, but there is still a way to speak, and you might do well with them if you remember if you remember your manners. Yeah. So again, these are also people, you know, when I say before that they could be willing to do a new activity, what I'm really thinking of is that they have this this social connection usually with what they're going to be doing for volunteering. And so they might not come in, you might not get somebody just walking through the door. It's going to be more that somebody told them, and you know, or my friend told me, or here comes the person that you've you've already recognized as somebody who comes to volunteer, but then they've brought a friend. That's usually how the silent generation is going to show up. It's going to be a little bit of a chain entry. You know, it's not going to be one-off people coming in to volunteer just out of the blue, just them individually, like maybe you'll see with some of the other generations where they don't need like a person to usher them in, like a friend, word of mouth. And so then with baby boomers, so these folks are not slowing down, and they continue to live longer and stay active. And some of them are retired, some of them are not, but wherever they are in their retirement or in the sort of place that they've climbed in to their career, where they've climbed up to, wherever they are in terms of professionalism or professional life, they are going to want to do something that has a higher sense of cause. And they are going to want to use their skills and expertise in their volunteer roles. So they're not so much going to roll up their sleeves like the silent generation. They are going to want you to tap into their skills. And this is a very skilled generation. A lot of us are on pins and needles when we hear someone's retiring anymore these days. We're not ready. We have discussions around succession planning for public, private, everything. So baby boomers will mostly all be retired by 2030. So there's a closing window there to sort of get their institutional knowledge for some of the things we're doing. But luckily they aren't slowing down. So they are going to be around, but they're going to be doing what they want to be doing for the most part and employing their skills. Some motivators of baby boomers, they like flexibility and personal growth. So a little bit more individualistic than the silent generation. They do well with public recognition. This is a way of saying thank you. You can say thank you to them one-on-one, but if you can say thank you in public, that's even better. And of course, personal gratification. This is more in comparison to silent. You know, we say this not because necessarily they're the ones that like personal gratification the most out of all the generations, but this is what has surfaced as a new thing for baby boomers that's different from the silent generation, is you actually are going to need some sort of reward in life for what you're doing. And it's not just life is hard and keep on working. What you can do with this generation is acknowledge accumulated wisdom and life experience. And images can be a powerful recruitment tool for this generation. Flyers with a picture, whether digital or not, you're going to want a picture somewhere. It's just says something. So so Generation X, these folks are more free. They didn't necessarily have anybody taking care of them after school because baby boomers were working. So they had a little bit more freedom and independence. Therefore, they don't want to all of a sudden, you know, when there was no tether with their parents, all of a sudden start working with you or volunteering with you, and then you have a tighter tether than they've ever seen. You know, they don't want that at all. They want to work individually on their own terms and they want to be independent, and they want to also be in a positive environment. They see the idea of having a choice. You know, I think baby boomers still have that sort of outlook that you do a job, and maybe not necessarily for Generation X. Not necessarily am I going to do this job if there's certain conditions present that I can't deal with. So you're going to highlight important, you know, you're going to highlight the social importance and direct volunteer impact for them, so that they see the orientation as to why they're there. You know, some folks will volunteer just to volunteer. And I've done that too before, where I've said, yeah, I will staple these for you, you know, or I will do something that's, you know, just a little task that can help out. Many hands make light work. But at the end of the day, you do want to see that if you're consistently giving your time to an organization, that you're clear with what's going on there and what kind of impact that has. And so you're going to want to communicate the opportunity as well to volunteer, you're going to give them opportunity to volunteer at their convenience. It's just going to be more durable plan for you to do that. And then outreach is best through email, text, or Facebook. Millennials. So the thing with millennials, and I don't know why this in comparison with the other generations, but what I have heard with millennials is that you can't put them in a category. And I think we've all heard that, but we have, through some research, we have seen that there are some things about millennials. They're loyal to causes. They're not loyal to brands. So, you know, if there is a belief system, if there's a cause out there that aligns with our beliefs and our values, that's going to be more of the pull than a brand. So we don't care what your organization's called. You know, we don't care if you have a gold medal in whatever, you know, it's just, it's going to be more the cause than the brand. We need to know how we're going to make a difference. Using photos, videos, and statistics are great on what the kind of impact that our work's going to do for you, for your target population, et cetera. And we have very busy schedules. And so you have to have some activities that we can fit into the full schedule, the schedule that's already full. Somehow we've got to be able to fit activities into that. And so we love social interaction. We are always thinking about what can be better, which is kind of a hard place to be in. You think of always getting to the next thing and glass half empty and things like that. So, but also millennials are not necessarily as independent as Gen Xers were. So we are open to feedback. We're maybe asking for it. And the other thing about millennials is we love teamwork, actually. I mean, not all of us, I don't want to speak for the whole lot, but that social interaction is a big deal. So having volunteer opportunities where we're socializing with others while we're doing it and having that synergy going on is going to be key for millennials. So not necessarily working by ourselves or independently like a Gen Xer at all, but maybe in a team. So what we've learned about Gen Z so far is that they're even more leaning towards that instant gratification and that amelioration or that improvement of things all the time. What can be better? What can be better? They want to express themselves. They may have felt like they couldn't get enough self-expression. Every household is different. So, but this could be due to a few different things. You know, as we become more prone to use technology on a regular basis, perhaps we're not doing the same activities in family that we used to do. And so there is this need, this self-expression or sense of belonging that comes out in Generation Z, that if you can touch in with that, that's going to be great. They like to focus on knowledge and being informed. They like to use information. They're interested in learning. Their authenticity is a big deal for them. And privacy and security. So if you think of some of the life influences that we discussed, but also the idea that parents could or maybe didn't consider the child when they were flaunting their photos on Facebook, or, you know, naked baby pictures, or, you know, whatever was going on that Gen Z had no control over at all. They're starting to become actually quite perturbed when they realize that their privacy has been violated all their lives. And so there is some articles out there on that. And but then just to again reiterate that immediacy that's needed in their activities that reach a goal quickly. So setting up small milestones and small rewards, whatever, it doesn't have to necessarily be a gift or a real reward, but like a level up, you know, or something that where you're going to show results very quickly along the way, and what that result equates to. You're this much closer to doing this impact thing, you know, those types of messaging with your Generation Z volunteers, it's going to be key. Otherwise, there might be like a disassociation with the volunteer activity. So we have some Gen Z that aren't of age yet as well. And so this might change a little bit as well, because this is a developing generation still. So I have to say that. I want to ask a question to the chat, and maybe just look at the chat and see what we've been saying here. Yeah, great. Great additions. And so I have a question for you all. Now that you've sort of looked at these different panels that I have, and I will put in now another handout that I had prepared that kind of summarizes these last couple slides. This is what we call the Age Matters Recruitment Strategies Matrix. It's a mouthful, but and then I think I might have pasted everything, which is fine. So you see the worksheet you already have. Maybe some of you arrived late and you need that worksheet. So that's great. The worksheet's in there. But the first thing that that's on there is the matrix, that PDF of the matrix. And this just lays out, okay, the kinds of like a little description about that generation, what kind of motivations and what kind of messaging you want to kind of think about. And then of course I have a PDF of my slides. So there's your repertoire of program materials there. But the question I would like to ask you all with this is, what kind of messages are you thinking of now for these different groups? What generation of volunteers are you interested in targeting or retaining or strengthening or training? So, you know, for example, we would like to train our Gen Z volunteers. We have successfully recruited a group of, you know, volunteers from Gen Z. We want to focus on training them. Like what is now your idea about messaging that you have for knowing some of this information now? And while you think of that, yes, so is there a specific generation you're targeting, recruiting, retaining, or training? And what kind of messages are you thinking of using? My question you know, how do you, assuming you do recruit volunteers currently, and that you do wish that you could do more for retention or training or recruiting, how do you reward volunteers? So how would you reward a volunteer who is already, you know, seeing accolades in their career and is using their skill set in your organization? How do you reward a volunteer that really needs sort of that constant messaging of you're getting there, look what you've done already, that type of messaging that there is that someone's following along with what you're doing. And I am talking about Gen Z because I'm on their slide. Someone's following along with what you're doing, and they're giving you those flares, those friendly flares that you're hitting the mark. And you know, why you think of this question about what messaging you think, you know, you can say in the chat box and share your strategies with others. You can also sort of make note in the worksheet that I gave you. And you'll have some time in the discussion after this presentation. Also, we'll have a great discussion with Pam and Billy as well. So I am so curious to see where everything goes. But while you're thinking of that, just percentage wise, we have a really nice spread of generations right now out there. So we've got, as far as, you know, those, Brookings Institute says that you've got the different generations that represent around 20 to 22% across the main four. So not counting the silent generation and that greatest generation that represent about 7% of the population. When you get to the baby boomers, the Gen X, the millennials, and the Gen Zs, it's about 20 to 22% for each one. And of course, the millennials and boomers are higher. They're more, they're a bit larger groups than the others, but there's a really, right now, even just versus 5 years ago, and of course we have our new census data out. So right now it's a very even spread of those four generations: boomers, X, millennial, Gen Z. So great, great set of challenges right now for you all. This is a little bit more tricky than it used to be. What do we have next? These are my questions I've been asking you. And so I might be at the end of my slides and we can already open up a discussion. I'm not sure what time it is. Oh, 9:15, so we've done well. Billy says, we use high skill volunteers and focus on baby boomers, Gen X. I'm working to improve engagement recognition. Some focus on millennials, but not as much yet. So yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense because I see this with other organizations is they just can't get the millennials out doing stuff. Why can't we get this group to do anything, you know, extra? And it's, you know, some of these characteristics we talked about today with the generations are situational characteristics. You can have, you know, so it's when you look at you know, an individual in general, you can attribute what they're doing and saying to their character or to the environment, you know, and so that's also why we don't freeze people in time or have these like hard definitions of people, is because, you know, you could be having a busy month, you could be having a life challenge, you could be having a hard day. That doesn't attribute, that should not, this is an attribution error. This is a cognitive bias to attribute those types of things to somebody's character or intentions. It's situational, but we do know some characteristics of the generations, which I've outlined today, that we want to sort of build our customizable approach to volunteer organizing. And yeah, so good comments in the chat. You know, important to make it a positive experience. I think that goes for all generations. There is a bit of difference into how to communicate that, I think, for the different generations. I, was actually speaking with someone the other day that is a volunteer for me, who's, coming on and giving a lot of hours and their expertise to, enrich our program. And they don't want to hear any recognition. They just want to roll up their sleeves, so it's hard to figure out exactly what that balance is. But I do think that rewards in general, no matter how you define it, have to be there. So there is a reward system. So you're going to want to think of messaging. You're going to want to think of the types of activities. You're going to want to think of the reward system. I mean it loosely. So let's open up to questions. What changes might you make? Feel free to add in the chat what you feel you might want to try. And then also, yeah, any questions you have for me or the group. And I assume it's okay to ask people to unmute, but they can use the chat if they want. It's really up to.
Absolutely, just fine.
Okay. Should I stop sharing my slides? You can look at your slide deck if you want to look through the slides. You have that now. And so I will stop sharing and we can all kind of see if there's a gallery view here where I can see.
And if you can unmute your camera so that we can see everybody, that would be fantastic. If you can't do that, we understand, some of you don't have cameras available, but if you can.
Yeah, and some of you might be in your pajamas, so.
Love it.
Nice to see everybody. The older volunteers don't need thanks, but they want to be heard and be useful. I agree. I agree, Terry. It's important to me as a volunteer to not be boxed in by my age. Yes. Yeah, and so on a counterpoint, how far do we want to go when we think about using generational characteristics to recruit and to communicate? And how aware are people of those characteristics and that you might already just be in tune with that, and then they are very aware that the messaging you're using has already targeted them or profiled them? That could be a turnoff. So it's a really touchy sort of approach. And I think that, connecting with individuals is probably more important than anything. I always think of the other cultural competency training that we do, where a lot of this stuff also applies. It's important to be aware of culture, but it's almost like race, culture, those types of things. It's like you need to forget and remember at the same time. Remember generational characteristics if you can. Remember cultural characteristics if you can. Be ready to throw it out the window. So yeah, great comments. We have not been good at acknowledging the efforts of our volunteers. That is definitely a goal of mine as a new volunteer coordinator. Great to hear it.
Terry shared that they struggle with gender more than anything. If you want to unmute Terry and kind of expand on that so the group can provide input, that would be great.
I think that especially we have special events coming up, and I'm putting them in certain roles, not knowing many of our volunteers. They're one-offs. They're coming in for certain things, And while I'm putting them in roles without knowing many of them, I kind of gear the guys for the bag check and the girls for the money areas and stuff like that. And it's not really fair to anybody, but I am going kind of sight unseen. So I tend to just kind of go with those my preconceived notions about what they would be good with until maybe I do get to know them a little bit better. And I think that's not necessarily fair for them, but I don't really know how else to do that when I don't know many of these people coming in.
And now you're thinking about it.
Yeah. I've always thought about it. I just don't think I've ever really, I don't really have a good answer about how to, or if I should worry that hard about it. They are just, most of them are just one-off volunteers looking for some community service or something.
Mm-hmm. So what are ideas? I don't have anything off the top of my head that would be like a solution to try for intake or assignment. Like I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I wonder others in the room, who are also doing this work, or, from a volunteer's perspective as well, what ideas they might have for that. Because that's a great, I think this is a challenge that I think what you're talking about is not foreign to other volunteer coordinators. I think this is something that they might struggle with as well. And I also have, so unfortunately today I will bow out around 9:30 or 9:40. So I'm here for, a 10 more minutes or so, and want to have any discussion or if anybody wants to share a scenario. I loved all the participation today.
Thanks so much, Nancy. We've really appreciated your session this morning and appreciate your time. We know you have
Yes.
to go to another conference shortly. So I would like to, again, thank you. And we're going to share a screen to welcome the session moderators for the discussion and move into
Sounds great.
some deeper discussion.
Sounds
Thank you,
great.
Harlan.
And I would also just add that, if you use that planning worksheet and want eyes on it, I'm going to put my email in the chat as well. I love seeing, any sort of feedback or next steps that people use from getting this presentation. So please don't hesitate. I hope I do hear from some of you, and there's my email in the chat.
Thanks, Nancy. Great
This is
presentation.
Hi, Harlan.
This is Harlan Johnson. I'm 79 years old, and I'm the chair of the Environment and Climate Justice team of an NAACP. I'm also involved with the Citizens Climate Lobby, the Climate Reality Project, and Sustain Rockford. All of these environmental groups are all older people. We have tried poorly, haven't done enough, but we've done some exploration, calling high school principals and people in colleges. But we don't have any high school or college students involved in any of these environmental groups.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, the famous Swedish girl who ended up talking to the UN, there are some people, there are a lot of young people involved, but in the
Yes.
Rockford region, we have totally failed to get them involved. And if we can get some passionate environmentalist youth,
Mm-hmm.
particularly bright and also racially and ethnically and economically diverse, involved in any of these groups, I'm particularly interested in the
Mm-hmm.
NAACP,
Yes.
those groups will take off. And until we get them, we're not going to expand beyond the 6 or 8 people we have in each of these groups.
I'm so glad you mentioned this. So in our workplace version of this, we focus on this a little bit more, because one thing that's going on with the generations as you go from silent to millennial is that you see this willingness to continue doing work no matter whether you see promotion or recognition or not. That diminishes, the willingness to do that diminishes. Millennials and Gen Z, if they don't get a leadership opportunity, they're going on to the next thing. It's really hard for people to deal with. It's really hard for when I did this program for one company. It was a company. That's hard for people who've climbed over decades in their career and who are in those leadership roles, decision-making roles. It's really hard for them to hear it, but the turnover with millennials and Gen Z is real because there are leadership opportunities somewhere. Wherever we're going to get that leadership opportunity, that's where we're going to go. So I would recommend an ambassador, a new position, maybe ambassador positions, maybe even leadership positions on your board of directors. Somehow that leadership opportunity, and it doesn't necessarily have to be recognition, but if there's a way to get folks all the way up to that leadership role,
Oh,
is
that's
gonna
where I'm at.
be.
That's why I'm wanting to get these young people in, because I'd like them to come in and take over as leaders. Here, I'm a 79-year-old white guy as the chair of the Environment Climate Justice team of the NAACP. I'd much rather be a member of this group
And see,
and have it led
a
by
young, diverse leader with,
yeah,
don't give up.
positive, angry, I don't care, just somebody who's really, really passionate about it. And I don't know how to reach out to them. And I personally reaching out to them may not be, the medium is the message, in the sense that I am, as a medium, I don't have what Jane Fonda has. She is able to reach across the generations. I may be able to, but so far I haven't even connected with any likely candidates. And I've talked with people who specialize in working with youth, and they have not responded. And I'm not sure what that's about.
Have you thought of like a swap? You know how you hear of like community swap or wife swap? Like, this is horrible that I'm saying this, but you've heard of a swap. So is there a youth organization that does environmental justice somewhere, like a chapter, a school chapter?
Nationally there is, but locally, total desert.
I've seen Chicago school chapters, but I haven't seen any downstate youth chapters for environmental groups. So I wonder about reaching out and doing a swap or partnership. And any other ideas that folks have for that? That's another very challenging. This issue with succession is really important. This is the issue of this coming decade, is succession.
And from an environmental perspective, we're talking about the future of our descendants. The terms I'm hearing is, what kind of an ancestor will I turn out to be? A valuable one or not? So anyway, thanks for listening to my concern.
You're welcome. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Harlan.
I think, I'm going to jump in real quick. Harlan, I think there are lots of opportunities to hear what young people have to say. We just have to maybe stop talking and listen, right? There are places and platforms where young people are sharing lots of opinions about social justice, about the environment, about causes they care in. We have to listen where they're speaking, right? And that, for the most part, for that generation, happens to be social media. Follow WREX on social media. Follow WIFR. Follow the Rockford Register Star. Follow some of those, pages, our local pages. You're gonna see names pop up. You're gonna see the same people having conversations and advocating. Let's listen to what they have to say, and then let's engage them in conversation by my mom used to say to me, and I am not good at this because you know me, I'm a total talker. My mom used to say, you have two ears for a reason. You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you speak, right? I still don't do that very well. I think why we're struggling to engage young people in our organizations is that maybe we're not doing a great job of just hearing what they have to say and then using, instead of formulating what we want to say next, we need to authentically and organically and compassionately hear them where they're at and then meet them there.
And where are they at? What, for example, what social media? Where do I go? How do I find?
Martisha, I'm glad you popped on, Martisha, but I think that locally, I think that you engage in like news outlets on social media. So I would say first you look through Facebook, you look through Instagram, you look through maybe even Twitter, and see kind of what is the atmosphere like. What are we hearing? What can we glimpse from this and gain from this? And then honestly, I think reaching out to them isn't a terrible thing. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're not the right person. Maybe a 79-year-old white guy isn't the right person to send a message to them on Facebook and say, hey, I loved this comment that you made on the WREX story about blah, blah, blah. What more, like, can we talk about that? Like, what more, like, you might not be the right person, right? That's very intimidating for young people, but there are people in your organization that can. Martisha, what are your thoughts on that?
I was just going to share 2 points. One, definitely Facebook, Instagram would be a way to try to connect with that specific demographic. But in addition to that, I think and we've been having this conversation for the past year, ensuring that there is a sense of belonging and that they understand that even though you may come from another generation, that you actually want to hear what they have to say, that it's okay if they bring to you their feedback unfiltered, not in the way you may want them to deliver it. I think those are things that are very, very important. They want to feel heard. And I would also agree with what Carrie said. When we talk about engaging diverse populations, whether it's millennials or it's diversity related to ethnicity, having a connection to someone who is within that demographic, who can kind of maybe give you some points in terms of connecting with those individuals is very, very important. I know for me, I speak again as being a millennial and from the African-American community, I am much more likely to get involved if there's an individual that looks like me or is within my demographic that says, hey, I've been involved in this organization. They want some feedback. Will you join me? Millennials quite often don't want to be the only person in the room from that demographic. So so hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yeah, it's that same concept of tokenism, right, Martisha? Yeah, like young people don't want to be the token young kid, right? They don't want to be the token millennial. Yeah, they don't want to be seen as, I'm speaking for my entire generation.
Yeah.
And we have, organizationally, we've done that.
Yeah, Nancy, I saw you kind of nodding your head in agreement there. Did you have something you wanted to share too?
Yeah, I was the millennial on the plan commission, right? And you don't want to have all that responsibility to sort of bring forward those viewpoints, and you feel like you're interjecting left and right, and then you get looks like, what this ankle biter doing every day, trying to derail our meetings. But then you think, there's all this missing perspective. Why do I have to be the ankle biter, right? And so you could spread it out a little, have a couple people that are, from that demographic or whatever, it's super helpful. And so then you don't always have like one bad cop or something, So yes, that's why I was nodding, because again, I could only do that for so long. And then it was sort of like,
I agree. Millennials always have opinions. So make sure you're ready for us to raise our hand and speak out.
So do Gen Xers, right, Pam?
So
Harlan,
before we move on, I just want to say thank you to Nancy because I know she's going to need to jump
Yes,
off.
thank you.
Fantastic job. Great to have you with us.
Thanks.
We hope to see you again soon.
I do too, and I hope that I have some meaningful conversation again with any of you who choose to contact me. And so have a wonderful day. Thanks for attending the session. And again, it was an honor to be here. Thanks for all of your interest, and feel free to reach out. I might send Billy one additional link on our community and economic development program that we have within U of I Extension. So, which might be helpful because we have some other programs that are in line with organizational development. So thank you again.
thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
What an interesting conversation. Tell me, I have a few ahas myself, but tell me what yours were. Like, what are the things that jumped out at you?
Being a volunteer coordinator for a retired and senior volunteer
Yeah.
program,
Yeah.
most of my volunteers are in the silent generation.
Mhm.
They're in their 70s or 80s. I have a
Yeah.
few baby boomers, but yeah, and it's like hits them right there. This is what they are. This is what they do. This is what they think is important. But I'm also running into the health issues,
Yes.
the bad backs, the knee replacements, the shoulder replacements, the beginning Alzheimer's, the early dementia.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a whole different sort of fun and issues, but
Yeah.
they're lovely, lovely people.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, one of the things I'm running into is I have people who want to be out and doing something. I had a lovely lady come in yesterday with her daughter, and her daughter is looking for something for her to do, but she has Alzheimer's.
Mm.
So she's a wander risk.
Mm.
She tends to just wander off. So how do I put this person in a volunteer position where she might not be safe?
Yeah.
Any suggestions?
Yeah, they obviously they need a minder. They need a co-volunteer who's with them, and
Yeah.
that takes care of it. My mom died of Alzheimer's. I have a lot of background in that.
Okay, so pairing her up with somebody else, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I would say there could be opportunity for her to, is she looking for volunteer work to just kind of keep her mind sharp and kind of engage her senses, or is she looking for socialization?
I think the socialization, a chance
Yeah.
to get out of the house. She apparently left her house. She lives on one side of the Rock River and her daughter lives on the other side of the Rock River. And she took off one day and walked to her daughter's house
Yeah.
down Auburn Street, across the bridge.
I mean, you do have the right to say no to anybody you don't feel comfortable with, even though you want to
Yeah.
provide. Any, I'm just as bad about it. You want to give everybody a chance,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, you have to be considerate of your own company's liability and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
And the thing
Not to be the
is,
mean one, but
with our
it's true.
program, most of the volunteers don't volunteer here. I'm placing them at other organizations. I'm sending them to Midway Village, Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful,
Habitat for Humanity.
Yes, I send them to you.
Yeah.
The Restore. My people love the Restore. Oh my gosh.
It's good.
So yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I think Harlan's got a good point there about the buddy system. Is there an organization you're close to that you could have a conversation with and say, this is the situation? You're right, Jeannie, it is risk management, right?
Yeah.
Pairing someone with someone that would be, that is really kind of probably the best way to do it, is to kind of ensure that, liability of, having someone pair with them. You could also, if they're looking for, things to just kind of keep their mind sharp, you could, certainly suggest, you know, if there's a take-home project that they could do, like folding letters and stuffing envelopes, those kinds of things. Or I know it's probably a long shot, but are there some memory care facilities that are looking for volunteers? Like there could be an opportunity there, like
Yeah.
maybe they just come and play Scrabble, right? Where they're not necessarily volunteering, but they feel like they're volunteering.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be, you know, there could be an opportunity there, but
Yeah.
Jennifer,
People,
oh, go ahead.
people who have someone in their family that they're having to deal with who has dementia, this is a perfect way to practice learning how to deal with therapeutic fibbing and so many of the other things that one learns when one is learning how to interact and relate to a person who's experiencing dementia. And if a person is able to pair up with someone who's not a family member, they can practice that, and that may help them. They may be benefiting by being the minder for this volunteer.
Okay.
So everyone wins.
So all
I
good
would say
points.
I love the concept that you shared where if a volunteer isn't a perfect fit for you, is there another organization that that person can volunteer with? And I think we have a network here on screen where we can continue to work with NICNE to develop some type of way of the volunteer isn't a fit for me, but boy, oh boy, I found someone with the skill set that might be a good fit for you, and to pass that along, because it really is, we are all in this together as it relates to volunteers. And so I think there might be a way for us to continue to share our lists with our other partners for mutual benefit in the non-for-profit sector.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I love the aha that you put in the chat, right? There is a fine balance between forgetting generations and also, right, ensuring that you're working with them correctly, right? That there's this, you kind of have to constantly have it in the back of your mind, but it not be, you know, something that you make decisions about, or, you know, make decisions based solely on. So that's a great aha. Anybody else have any aha moments? Things that she said that like really rang true to you?
Carrie, I
Hi,
know I'm
so-
talking to, go right ahead, Christine.
Oh, it's okay. So last night, I work with Illinois Extension myself.
Yep.
I work with our Master Gardener and Master Naturalist program, which are volunteers that work at community gardens, work on and some environmental, you know, restoration projects, conservation days, things like that. So I think really, you know, everyone's always trying to recruit, and typically the demographic that volunteer for us are retired individuals. You know, maybe we might get some early retirees that take the classes and then they come out to volunteer. But we don't always capture those Gen Zs and millennials as much. And so really ours is that transition to recruit, because the training sessions usually occur through the day, work day. Well, that has been, you know, it limits so much on everybody. And so really trying to move our trainings to weekends or evenings that's accommodating to everybody's work schedule. But really giving that leadership opportunity kind of hit home. Last night, I had a unit meeting, and it was for our Master Naturalist group. And I had asked a facilitator with the Heartland Conservancy, which is one of our partners that kind of has the same natural resource, you know, entity, but he was a Gen Z. He kind of he was working there, and he's quit. And he came to talk to the group because he's volunteering with the group, but he also wanted to give like the perspective that why he joined the Master Naturalist group, and what, being a young person coming on, why he felt certain things were important. And it was kind of nice coming from him instead of just always coming from me saying, hey, this is why we should invite them to come. He actually came and said, I wanted to do this because I wanted to show my friends how they could transform their yard into using native plants, and why it was important to use native plants and how they could do it. And, you know, he was giving them, so they asked him, well, how did you start? And he, you know, well, I laid down cardboard, and, you know, he kind of gave a step by step, and it was nice to hear his perspective Was it the way they might have done it? No, they
Yeah.
might have, or they might not have, but it was nice to hear that he gave his perspective on it and what worked for him. And they asked a lot of questions, from him. And it was nice to hear, his answers to him, and he was comfortable, and he, he knew that some of the individuals from coming to the Conservancy Park District already. So there was a little bit of comfort for him. So we tried to make him, comfortable and welcome, but also just hearing his perspective on that was kind of nice for them. And then he brought, he uses TikTok, and he watched the metamorphosis of the monarch caterpillar, and he did TikTok, and they were like, what's TikTok? Just bringing that information was nice to hear, and they're like, oh, it's real easy. I'll show you guys how to do it, and it was just that there wasn't really a generation gap. It was more of a question answer session. And that was the nice perspective last night. And I think sometimes allowing that opportunity, even though you may be out of your comfort zone as, Gen X, I'm kind of like into social media, but my kids tell me, Mom, Facebook is no longer, that's your age. You really have to be open to try something new. And I think for us, really having that openness to say, okay, I'm going to try TikTok with you guys, show me how to do it, and ask questions yourself, I think will help. And TikTok, I am not doing any of those challenges, just so you know, but some of our volunteers say, hey, I'll try that, so that might be something just to bring someone in to show you and show them something new on the technology side.
That's awesome. Thank you.
If it makes you feel any better, Christina, as you talk about like the generations, I'm the millennial. And so in most rooms, I feel like I'm like one of the youngest in the room. And my nephew definitely has told me that I'm an old lady right now. I mean, I don't know anything about TikTok. He still has to teach me. So if it makes you feel any better, I don't know how to TikTok either.
Okay, good. Good. I'm all about Facebook and posting all the time, and no TikTok yet.
Yeah,
really
I haven't made it.
That was one of my biggest aha moments in this conversation. And honestly, I do trainings on generational differences. I think probably to this group a few times. Last year at the conference, I did a thing on generations, and I learned a lot from her today. But one of the things that's always interesting to me is the method of communication. So we recently created a communications director position at Habitat, and I hired a millennial. And I had this, we wrote an annual communications plan, and I sat down with her and kind of explained it. And she was like, you print a newsletter? And I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, we print a newsletter. And so one of the things that we did when we went through and looked at all of our communications tactics was we looked at what generation reads that. So we print our newsletter, right? We email our newsletter, we put it on our blog, on our website, and we post it to all of our social media channels. So everybody's getting it's the same content. It is our newsletter, but we're using every platform. So we're posting it to our Instagram story, and we're posting it to our Facebook, but we're also printing it like a church bulletin, and we're snail mailing it to people because we have every generation, right? So when we go through that kind of who volunteers for your organization, I have everybody, right? I feel like we kind of span the generations for our volunteers. And so it was really fun to have a conversation with our communications director, who's like, you print that? We spend the money to do that? I'm like, we sure do. We sure do. So I think that's always one of the really interesting ones, right? Is boomers grew up with that, and email was kind of introduced, professionally through, with the baby boomers. And so Gen Xers, we still email a lot, but my 12-year-old stepson is like, why do you check your email 1,000 times a day? And I'm like, that's how grown-ups talk. We do not send each other, he will record a video of himself and text it to him, to his friends, right? Or he'll FaceTime them, or he'll do a voice memo, right? If I want to talk to Martisha, I email her, right? I sometimes text you some funny things, but when I want to talk to Pam, or I want to talk to Billy, or I want to talk to Carly, I email. And so right? We are trying to figure out all those channels of communication. So that's always one of the really interesting things for me is like, you know, we have generations of people who read the church bulletin, who read the newspaper, who still get the physical newspaper at their homes. And Carly raised her hand, and you read it, right? I mean, my dad still sits at the, you know, kitchen table every morning and reads the newspaper from front cover to back cover. So I felt that was a really cool kind of piece of training. I'm glad she talked about that, like communication styles for different generations.
I think my aha moment was going to the Gen Z, because now there's a generation that's being talked about, you know, after my generation, which is exciting. But my wheels started turning because my passion is like strategic planning. That is like part of my heart. I'm a nerd for it. And so I started thinking, as we're planning, you know, the next 5, 7, 10 years, what are we doing now to engage with that particular demographic, to build our volunteers for the future? And so even if they are not the particular demographic that you're looking to work, I need to start engaging them now so that in the next 3 years, they're prepared to be a part of our organization in some way, shape, or form, whether it's on a board or volunteering in our activities. And so that was my aha moment. I was just like, you know what, it's time. Like, we need to start now and not when we need them.
Yeah. Anybody have any final things you want to talk about with Nancy's presentation, generation, things that your organization is doing that maybe you want to share are like your strengths, or even, you know, some things we've already talked about, a few struggles, but anybody else have anything they want to share as it relates to generations? Awesome. Well, I want to say thanks for sticking with us. I think, Billy, do you remember how many people joined us for the very, very first one? It's like 88 people or something came to that very first session as part of this series. So thanks for being our backbone and coming back month after month after month. It's been a pleasure to get to be a part of this and get to know each of you and really kind of go through this series of conversations with all of these different presenters with each of you. We are constantly, and by we, I mean NICNE, we are constantly, you know, trying to get feedback from our participants to ensure that what we're providing as an organization is what our nonprofits need. Exchange on Volunteerism has been around for a long, long, long time, and has been well received by members and nonprofits in Rockford. A couple of years ago, we started to do this conference, and we did a one-day, very successful conference. And we plan to do that in 2020. And then, of course, as everyone knows, we had to pivot to this kind of webinar series. So tell me, as it relates to this series, kind of what were some of the things you really appreciated about it? What were our strengths? What were the things that we did well, that you appreciated about being able to have this series? Give me all the good.
I really like the way this worked out. I like the fact that each session has a specific focus, and then you have a whole month to just kind of ruminate on that and really internalize it before you shift to a different focus. Whereas if you're doing it all in one day, you just hit this overload and you just quit functioning. So I like this format.
I would second that motion. I really enjoyed this. I think that the way it was all put together was just phenomenal. And kudos to all the speakers who joined us in this. It may have been some things that we have heard before, but it was just wonderful, especially during the pandemic time, when all of us were in our house and we couldn't come, face to face. This was a wonderful way to be able to connect still with people during this time. So I appreciated it. And I think for a whole year, for $55, I got more out of my $55 for a whole year than in one day. Even though I missed the snacks that you all had, the good snacks.
Yeah, I love it. That's great feedback. Thanks. Anyone else?
One last attempt I want to make. I believe that word of mouth is another wonderful way to communicate. And so using word of mouth, I'm asking all of you, if any of you know a young person who might be concerned about the environment, text me at 815-494-5666 with that person's name and contact information, and I'll make sure we reach out to that young person. Thank you.
Always giving a plug, Harlan. I like it. It wouldn't be you if you didn't take the opportunity. I like it. If you know anybody who likes to build homes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Very fine.
Hello, this is Linda from the Veterans Assistance Commission
What I found
of
is
Stevenson
if you
County.
pet him and
I'm here
hold
with
it
Marna.
And then just do like that, and they sit
Hi.
up here and then pick them
Hello.
off with by hand, and then put them someplace where they won't get all over our floor.
Myrna.
Ma-
Hi.
Hello, can you
Hi,
hear
do
me?
you have, yeah, I can hear you. Go
Okay,
ahead.
well, I'm here with Marna, and I thought it was great that she signed us up for this. And the thing that I took out of this session is that we're back to our basic skills. One of the girls said something about listening. You know, listening's been around for a long time, and we need to bring that back in. You know, it's so important to listen to the different generations. And then another thing that I was thinking about is I was sitting here listening is in the old days, our parents would say the generation gap, remember how we would use those words? And that's what we kind of have here right now again, but we want to bring it all back in together. So it was fabulous presentation.
Great.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, great. Such great feedback. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. This was, it wasn't ideal, right? To move and, kind of move from how we had planned to do the conference. But hearing you, give some positive feedback, Carly, I really appreciate that concept of, we're not necessarily drinking from a fire hose when we do this on a monthly basis. You go to a full day conference, or, even some of us have been to 2, 3, 4 day conferences. You get home and you're like, bleh, right? Like, I don't even know what I learned. But we're all going to walk away from today's 1 hour conversation remembering great communication styles and just all sorts of different things as it relates to generation. So that's really great feedback. Anybody else have anything you want to share about what you liked about this series? I've heard content. People appreciated the actual content and the topics that we did. Some people liked the format, being able to do it on a monthly basis. I see in the chat, some people liked the remote aspect so that they could take this from home and kind of fit this better into their schedule. Anything else I'm missing in terms of positives or pluses?
I'd like to add something.
Yeah.
I think the extraordinary moderators we had after each discussion really added some depth to the conversation and some diverse views. I mean, you hear from Billy and I all the time, right? But to have Carrie and Martisha, one, your level of expertise, but two, hearing you talk about we NICNE warms my heart, right? And that's what we've always hoped, is that we would broaden the circle of we, right? And that we would all feel that we are NICNE. So to me, that comes from the heart.
Oh, thanks. We are NICNE. We are. All right,
Awesome.
Martisha, I'll pass it to you.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about what you've enjoyed and what you've appreciated in the past year with the sessions. Now we'd like to get some feedback on what can we do to improve upon our future offerings, any creative ideas or suggestions for us as we look towards the future. And you can go off screen if you feel the need to, if there's any areas you want to share, or feel free to type in the box as well. And again, creative ideas, if there's anything you think we can do to improve these sessions, any ideas on future speakers or future topics that maybe we missed out on, any ideas there?
Sometimes silence is golden.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. Sometimes silence is golden.
Yeah, like maybe we don't have anything to improve on.
But also, I'm sure, and I see that Billy put that in the chat, if you do have areas where maybe you don't want to share with the entire group, I know that you can connect one-on-one, whether it's during our discussion today, but also, you know, you can email Billy. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to get that feedback to you after the session.
So in that same vein, what do you need from us? Like, if however we do this next year, whether we go back to an in-person day or we go maybe hybrid, you know, whatever we choose to do. Tell me, what do you need from us? What do you need the most? What are you organizationally struggling with as it relates to volunteers? How can we help you? I'm going to speak for Harlan and say recruitment. How do we bring new volunteers to the table? How do we bring diverse volunteers, both in culture and in age, in race, and in gender? How do we diversify our volunteer base, and how do we bring more people to the table? So those are two things we know you're struggling with. What else can we help you with?
Well, Carrie, I would add just kind of a fun idea that could also feed into what can we help you with if there was some opportunity to have a more social setting, if we can do something in person, and let's get together at some point in time and maybe talk about the wins. Let's talk about what we've actually integrated into our plans from these sessions. I think that would be fun, something informal and just to network with each other.
That is a great idea.
If there's an interest, I have a whole series I can provide with regard to communication skills. I've been working on this stuff for over 40 years, building on the work of Marshall Rosenberg, and particularly focusing on a different way. People talk about listening all the time, but how you listen is important. And people talk about empathy, and there's a particular brand of empathy that I share with people that is different from what people often think of as empathy. So if that's of interest to people, I'd be happy to do a series on that.
Thank you.
And you know, we recently did a survey and had about 104, I think it was, nonprofits respond to it. And two of the things that rose to the top of the list of things that they're interested in, which had never risen to the top of surveys in the past, where we want to network and we want to collaborate. We've not heard that in the past, and that's new to this kind of post-COVID environment. Is people hungry to get together and want to look at new ways of doing business by working closer with other organizations. So whether that fits with volunteering or volunteerism, I'd be curious to hear.
That's great. Yeah,
I would agree. I think we have some comments here. Thank you for sharing. How to gently fire a volunteer, maybe help them move on to another opportunity. How to diversify, and yes, really cool recognition ideas would be like some specific topics to integrate in there. And then also reading along here, maybe including a training on how to really manage other people. This is my first time being a leader. I'm in this position and just want to see how, having a hard time figuring out how to officially manage a group of people. So how do you manage a group of volunteers? So maybe digging into that more. Tough conversations with volunteers. So that's a topic that I think that's the second round, whether you got to help them move on or have a tough conversation with them. How to tell a volunteer that maybe they are not able to do this particular work. So those are some great comments.
yeah, thank you.
Any other ways that we can improve or fun ideas for us to integrate?
I'd be curious too to hear from folks as to whether they prefer like the regional speakers like we've had here, or if you prefer a nationally recognized speaker complemented with local folks. What do you think?
Any preference there? take silence as golden, so pretty open if they have an expertise, whether it's national or local or regional, feeling comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I don't have a preference for either. Yeah, I do think that there is some significant benefit to bringing in national speakers. But then are there ways for us to continue that dialogue after a learning session that we get with a national speaker? Are there some regional subject matter experts or local subject matter experts that can help us, you know, continue that conversation? I think about how great this John Powell belonging task force is going. I love that format. I love that concept. So.
And I would say for me, I like the mixture, you know, and I say mixture because there's something about the Midwest where there is a unique culture to the Midwest. And so having someone who's able to share through a session that has that unique perspective, I think is insightful too. There's some fun cultural things with us being here in the good old Midwest. As I say that with a Southern accent, I don't know where that came from. So, so looks like we have something else here in the chat, Carrie. It says maybe addressing some of the newer technologies, social media, how they work and how to use.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't done that in a long time. Yeah, we haven't had that kind of conversation. A lot of new platforms and even the way you use platforms that we're used to have changed. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, Carly.
I would be interested to know or to get your guys' feedback on if you had any preference on types of presenters. And what I mean by that is we've had some presenters where we kind of held off on the questions until the end. And we've had some presenters who have offered questions during more of a discussion format. Do you guys have any preference to that? What helps you to feel more engaged, or does both work?
I think both work. It's just the personal style of that particular presenter.
Awesome. I love it. Got another person in the chat that said both works. Amanda mentioned it would be nice if there were, you know, one document shared at the very end of all of our sessions that had a list of contact info for all of the speakers, so it's in one place. It's a great idea.
Yeah,
it'll be a good reminder for us to connect.
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet already for that, so I can absolutely configure that and share it out with you all.
Of course you do.
Perfect. Any other feedback or suggestions that you want to provide to us?
Tell us what's your preference in terms of how we do it? Like, do we go back to in person? Do we stay virtual? Do we do hybrid? What are your, where are you at?
I like the idea of hybrid.
Okay.
Some things where we get together and then some things like this. I definitely like the idea of spreading the information out through a time span rather than hitting it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. This is Linda.
Go ahead,
I've
Linda.
never heard of hybrid. Would someone explain that to me?
Yeah, it means that some of us are in person and some of us are virtual. Or it could also mean that some events are in person and some events are virtual. So it's a combination of both in person and virtual.
Oh, okay. I like that idea a lot too. Thank
Do
you
you?
for explaining that to me.
Of course, yeah. The one thing I really appreciated about this kind of virtual platform was that, gosh, in the beginning, we had people joining from all over, right? Like the Will County Forest Preserve, right? Like the people from Will County aren't going to drive all the way to Rockford for, you know, maybe for a full day conference they would, but for like an ongoing series like this, you know, we had people from library districts all over the suburbs. We had people from the Museum of Science and Industry joined once. Like there are, like, I mean, just what a great opportunity for NICNE to have, you know, an impact on, you know, really a significant geographical area for people. Oh, Christina, you're from Mount Vernon? Wow. So you would not be driving to Rockford once a week or even for maybe even a full day conference. Marsha, I'm with you on the occasional face-to-face. I have, yeah, you've participated more because of the virtual aspect of it, but yeah, there is something to be said about face-to-face. Yeah, agreed. Cool. Well, thank you for your feedback. I think everybody's having these conversations now, although I think people are maybe pulling their reins back a little bit with this new surge and Delta variant, but I think we've missed each other, right? We've missed the camaraderie. We've missed the opportunity to, you know, get there a few minutes early if you're anybody but me, because I get there right on time, sometimes late. But like, you know, to share a cup of coffee with your friends and, you know, be able to chat with them afterwards and brainstorm with them and, you know, walk out to the parking lot with them. And, you know, we've missed that. This is a hard platform for us to be able to do that, but it's also convenient and it's bite-sized pieces and it's digestible and it's, yeah, there's lots of pluses, so. Cool, Billy, anything else I know you're feverishly taking notes. I feel like we have covered all of the questions.
I would agree with that. I have no further questions. It's been fantastic feedback, very much appreciated.
Cool. Well, I'll say this before we sign off. Thank you. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for being here month after month after month. Thanks for engaging in meaningful conversations and being a part of the NICNE family. Pam and Billy, thanks for organizing such an incredibly easy platform. Like, we don't do anything. Martisha and I just literally log on. You do everything for us. And you have been this has been so easy and so flawless. So thank you for that. But also thanks for letting us be a part of it.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Pam and Billy, for letting us be a part. And just thank you to everyone who attended the sessions. I mean, although I and Carrie had the chance to facilitate, I'm sure we both would agree that we got much more value from learning from you guys as well during these conversations. So yeah. I've appreciated and I look forward to staying connected with everybody.
Fantastic. Go ahead, Pam.
No, I just want to say thank you, Carrie, Martisha, to have people of your caliber working with us to be a part of the we of NICNE means a great deal to both Billy and I, and to have all of the participants that have been joining us each month. Again, that just broadens the NICNE family, and we're grateful for all of you. Go ahead, Billy.
I absolutely want to echo those sentiments, and it's just been fantastic learning with each of you and from each of you this past year. It's just been really a powerful experience. So I will be sharing the session recording for today. Please do take a moment to snap that QR code or to click the link in the chat and complete that session evaluation if you haven't already. I will share that speaker list that was requested with contact information and a link to the past 12 months of program recordings, along with the handouts from today's session. I will miss all of you. I talk to a lot of you in email between sessions or share information when you're trying to connect with somebody. I'm really going to miss that a lot. So please keep in touch. If you need anything, please let us know. And I'm also going to share links to our future programming opportunities in the hopes that I might see some of you there. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.